The Trump administration's drive to create one human capital management system for all of government is running into the unfortunate realities of government contracting. Two new protests are putting the Office of Management and Budget's aggressive timeline to fully transition every major agency to this consolidated, modernized system by July 4th, 2027, at risk. For an update on the administration's HRIT modernization program, Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller, joins me now. Jason, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, what do you know about the status of the protests on the HRIT contract?
This is one of those programs that seems like everybody's following across the government and in the industry, whether or not you're bidding on this or not. What we have learned is that there are two new protests that have been filed with the Government Accountability Office by unsuccessful vendors. Now, this means that the Office of Personnel Management, which is running the contracting acquisition part along with the General Services Administration, now have to deal with protests from IBM. They filed their protest on February 25th. And Economic Systems, Inc., or EconSys, filed their protest on March 2nd. Now, both companies, there's not a lot of details to share, but what we do know is that they believe they were inappropriately removed from the competition for this 10-year contract that could be worth as much as $1 billion.
So how will the protest then impact the timeline that OMB laid out in its December memo?
Let's start with the back end of the question, and then we'll get to how this could potentially delay it. If you remember back in early December, OMB put out a memo kind of calling for this consolidation of HR systems across the government. Now, in that, OMB Director Russ Vought and Scott Cooper, the OPM Director, said, hey, we have 119 different systems, a lot of redundancy, a lot of waste, nothing's modernized. So we want, by July 4th, 2027, to move every major agency to this new consolidated system. So they set it up in waves that this transition would start this year in fiscal 2026 and conclude by 2027. There are about 6-7 agencies in the first wave, about 8 or 9 agencies in the second wave. What these protests mean now is, okay, when will this contract be awarded so they can get started? Now, GAO has until early June to decide these cases. Terry, you and I know from covering protests over the years, sometimes they don't go all the way out the full 100 days that GAO has to look at these, but this will definitely put a delay on the program itself because the government has to respond, GAO has to look at it, there may be arbitration, GAO may tell OPM, wink, wink, nod, nod, you're not going to win this, you may want to take corrective action, or vice versa. The vendors could get, wink, wink, nod, nod, you're not going to win this, and they'll withdraw their protest. But either way, this will add more time to the acquisition. Now, I've talked to several sources who are following this very closely, and all of them have said to me the initial thought was that OPM would make the award at the end of January. Here we are early March. They still have not made the award, and obviously they've moved forward with some decisions. I've been told from multiple sources that both IBM and EconSys were eliminated from competition in that fourth and final phase, which include virtual live demonstrations and system testing. So what I know is they have not made the award yet. They are, quote unquote, potentially behind some schedules. It depends on who you talk to, but the protests are definitely not going to help.
When would they need to make an award by in order to keep on their schedule?
Terry, I think that's what's unknown about this is how long that migration will be. And I think one of the things that I've been told is that the two remaining competitors in this is Oracle and Workday. Oracle is partnering with Deloitte, and Workday is partnering with Accenture. And while Oracle's had some rough challenges with HR modernization, there's a DoD program we could point to that they ended up getting canceled earlier in 2025. Workday is fairly new to the federal sector. They have some programs with DIA, with Energy Department. Either of these are, if you will, the most well-established of these programs. So there would be, what one person said to me, one expert said to me, would be a lot of integration, a lot of data migration, a lot of big efforts to kind of get this program off the ground. The person who I spoke to said, well, there's also IBM, and IBM has actually been in this market for a long time, and they feel like IBM has a stronger foot to stand on for their protest, given that fact they already provide HR services to OPM, to GSA, to the Veterans Affairs Department. In fact, I found a press release from IBM that says they provide HR services to about 500,000 federal employees already, which is why I think is part of their basis for the protest to say, hey, how can we be eliminated when we are already doing this for a fourth or so of the federal government. So what would this mean to the long term? A lot of it depends. It depends on who wins and how much integration, rework, how much of that data migration would need to happen.
It sounds like the protests might be symptomatic of bigger problems in this kind of complicated government-wide project.
Absolutely right. Now, again, what OPM is doing and GSA are doing is looking for a single award. Now, anytime you have a huge contract, 10 years could be worth as much as $1 billion. That's what some industry experts say. You're going to run into, kind of a winner-take-all approach, and that never has sat well with industry. They don't want to be cut out of a market. Think about somebody like Workday who's trying to get into the federal market. If they would not win this procurement, they could be cut out of the market, and that could be worrisome. Oracle spent years and years in this market. IBM, Economists, they feel like if we don't get a shot here, could we be cut out of this market? So we've seen this with, for instance, the Defense Department's cloud program called JEDI. Remember that many years ago, that they tried to do a single award, and the big cloud vendors, whether it's AWS or Microsoft or IBM or Oracle, all pushed back really heavily, forcing DoD eventually to go multiple award. We've also seen big single award programs that did get through the acquisition process, but then struggled. What comes to mind? The Homeland Security Department's financial management consolidation attempts. In the mid-2010s, there were several attempts. Either they collapsed underneath their own weight, or they just never could get it off the ground. You've seen very similar with contract writing systems across the Army and the Navy. This is not unusual for the single award to struggle because all the eggs, if you will, are in that one basket. And I think that is a big concern. In fact, Terry, there's a new white paper from the American Federation of Scientists written by 3 former federal executives in the HR world, Steve Krause, Peter Bonner, and Gabe Mencia. They all wrote that a single award approach isn't inherently flawed, but it demands unusual discipline in execution and presents significant risks. And in fact, they offer 4 ways that the OPM and others could really get through this single award approach successfully. And interestingly enough, the 2 things that I'll just highlight among the 4 things they pointed out was protect their exit options, require data portability, not the use of custom code, and then maintain the bigger ecosystem, if you will, a curated marketplace of ancillary systems and solutions so the people who lost don't feel like they're out of that market altogether. So interesting. We have a link to that report on federalnewsnetwork.com as well.
It sounds like there's a lot of lessons to learn from history here.
And I think that's an absolutely perfect point to when we talk about these single award, big bang type contracts. In the past, they've just not worked well across the government. Even when, if you go back to the Bush administration, they consolidated payroll providers, they went from 26 different payroll providers to 4. I think at that time they realized one was just not going to work across government, but they did, have an iron fist to say these are the 4 you'll go to. And in fact, Terry, I've heard from sources that at least one agency has already requested a waiver to say, hey, we don't want to use this system. And I've heard from other sources that many others could be following them up saying, hey, we want to raise our hand and say we may not want to use this system either. And this will be interesting to see what OMB does if they actually push down the iron fist and say, nope, we don't care about your quote unquote special needs. You will be using the HR system, or will they issue the waivers?
There'll be a lot to watch.
Always is.
Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller. Jason, thanks for joining me.
Always a pleasure.
You can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com.